Let's get the view of Dr. Andreas Krieg, I think it is. Forgive me if I've got that wrong, who is an associate professor at the School of Security Studies at King's College London and a fellow at the Institute of the Middle Eastern Studies, who's been looking into this process. Andreas, thank you for being with us tonight. I appreciate your company. This feels like a really obvious question, but an important one, I think, which is, where do you begin with a process like this?
Yeah, good evening. Good question. Look, I think we have to look at this phase by phase, as your previous speaker was saying. I think we're now in the phase one. I think everyone should be very happy that hostages are coming home, and aid is coming in, and that we're beginning a process of ending this war, which has been going on for way too long. The bigger question, obviously, in the underlying, the more thorny issues that have been left out deliberately out of the negotiation is, security, governance, and reconstruction. And the three are somewhat interconnected. You will not have rebuilding, reconstruction in Gaza without a governance process, without people on the local level being able to allocate resources and really administering the reconstruction process. Then you need money, obviously. You need tens of billions, some people say hundreds of billions of dollars to rebuild. You then need the actual physical capability of doing it, of stripping back, of removing millions, billions of tons of rubble and ordnance, which is probably unexploded, from areas where we still probably suspect tens of thousands of dead people lying underneath the rubble. We need to rebuild the entire critical national infrastructure of Gaza, from water to electricity to roads, to actually make it accessible. And then you have to do this while you have 2.2 million people or so who still live in this most densely populated part of the world, among the rubble, and that you have to kind of move them around as you reconstruct. So reconstruction cannot begin everywhere at the same time. So you'll have phases, and all of that will probably take somewhat, couple of years, if not longer, to complete.
And presumably you have to get investment for that to happen. You have to get people to invest, and presumably that involves convincing people that it is something stable that they are investing in.
Absolutely. And so, as the previous speaker said, the images that we've seen over the last 2 days from Gaza, where you had Hamas, potentially, in five fights with different clans, where there are power struggles on the ground, where the security infrastructure is completely collapsed as the IDF is moving out, as governance is not sorted out, and as the plan itself seems to suggest that, once the IDF removes itself from the area, that there will be miraculously this technocratic government coming in to govern this place, and everyone will be happy ever after, and the Gulf states will put tens of billions of dollars into the Gaza Strip. That's not going to happen. There is, in terms of confidence and trust, there is none. There is none between Hamas and Israel. There's none between the US and the Palestinians. There's very little between the Palestinians and Hamas itself. So how do we rebuild that trust? And that's going to be very, very difficult. And obviously, external investors will, people, there will be probably a sort of donor conference where money will be pledged. But most people seem to think that that money will come from the Arab Gulf states, who are obviously well endowed financially. But everyone is relying on them to also bail us out in Syria, where we are seeing the same sort of bill. Rebuilding and reconstruction there will also cost in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And they don't have that sort of money. And so where's that money really going to come from? I don't know at this point. And I think we're taking a step at a time. A lot will probably come from developers themselves, but also private businesses will not take the risk unless it's underwritten by the international community, by the United States. And at the moment, as it stands, I don't think the Trump administration really knows what they've gotten themselves into. And there's always the fear that Donald Trump will lose patience and will just move on to the next big item, as he seems to think that he's resolved the 80-year-old or even longer sort of most protracted conflict in modern history, which he obviously hasn't. And so there are a lot of these very thorny issues that we haven't resolved yet, and we need to make sure that we do before we move to the next phase.
Because it strikes me, Andreas, the sort of interlinked here are law and justice and a little bit sort of, ideology, what this country will be about as it presumably at some point becomes Palestine. Of course, that feels like a very long way away, doesn't it, in reality? but how that influences the architecture, the structure of the streets. You know, it feels to me as though the sort of from top to bottom there are some issues to be worked out top to bottom, if that makes sense.
Oh yes, I think the issue, it's probably not about ideology, but one word you said there is justice. And the problem here is, if you look at this plan, which has been, made by not even technocrats, but people in the Trump administration, politicians who have their own vested interests, where you have people from the Blair organization pitching in, and obviously Arab states are trying to give their opinion as well. But essentially, this is a Trump plan, and it's half-baked. You've got very ambiguous 20 points that are, massive blanks to fill. And the problem here is that the Palestinians weren't part of that. The Palestinians weren't involved in that process. And the hope was that in the next negotiation, the next phase, the Palestinians their voices will be heard. But it feels a little bit for the Palestinians as a dictate from outside, where they're saying, here, we've got a plan of how to rebuild your area, and then you'll have your house, you'll stay there, and you'll be happy. And please forget about what happened over the last 2 years, the fact that we have an excess of 65,000 civilians dead, and the fact that we have, massive destruction, atrocities being committed. This idea of reconciliation as well, completely not touched upon at all. And obviously on the other side, the Israelis say that you have similar traumas from the 7th of October. So you have these extremely hurt societies, and nobody's really engaging them and dealing with them. It seems to be on elite level only. Yeah. And the idea of what is Gaza going to be all about? Is it going to be an internationally, technocratically administered territory, or is it part of a Palestinian state? And how is that Palestinian state going to look like? The idea behind it initially was that the Arab states, the Muslim states, were saying, we're willing to commit to this if at the end of this whole process there will be a two-state solution. And yes, the UK government says we're interested in a two-state solution, but we haven't done very little. We have done very little in the last couple of years to actually do anything about it. So the big problem is where does it all sit? And in terms of politically, is there ever going to be a Palestinian state? I don't see it at the moment.
Okay, Andreas, thank you for your time and your insights. I really appreciate it. Dr. Andreas Krieg, he's a associate professor at the School of Security Studies at King's College London, with us. We'll come back to that conversation, won't we? And we'll consider it, I think, a lot over the next couple of